Good morning to you. I wish I could keep the sound of the rain going as I make this recording, but then you've got the sound of computer fans, and it just I'm not confident that uh, it isn't going to compromise the important part of this, and that's the reading of the Word and commentary on it. And I'm not sure how well the stream is coming through, if it's choppy or not. I'm not, making this video very early in the morning on Monday, March 23rd, 2020. And it's about to turn 6 a.m. And it does seem to me that because so many people are home, that it might be a bandwidth issue. So much demand on the internet as people are streaming movies and whatever else at home. But this early in the morning, not as many people are. So I hope this day finds you rested and resting in peace. I know I had moments last night, in spite of my meditations on Psalm 91 and everything, where I was listening to certain podcasts and started to feel very anxious, particularly about what's going on in the state of California, where the governor basically has everything in place now to just say the word and martial law is in place. Effectually, it is. And basically, someone sneezed and they've taken away people's civil liberties. And the people have given them up. Giving them up without a fight. Now, I will say this. This week I visited a gun store, and of all the places I went that day, it was the busiest. In fact, as I was approaching the entrance, a couple walked out, a very young couple. She was carrying a bag of I don't know what, probably ammunition. And he was carrying a pump shotgun. A beautiful, well, it's ominous looking, but a black, looked like a 12 gauge perhaps, pump shotgun. And, it didn't bother me one bit. I think everyone ought to be walking around with guns. What is it they say? An armed society is a polite society. Does that mean every single person? Okay, see, this is where I don't want to get into this kind of discussion. Use your head. Use your head. But if we had a society of real men and real women, there wouldn't be a problem. Ever. Anyway, the number of people, they were raking in the dough in that place. I was astounded. 10:30 in the morning, must have been 40 people in there, shopping, buying, purchasing guns, ammo, you name it. Probably was that way all day, and probably that way every day of the week. Why? Well, it's a natural response, and I can guarantee you this, that the powers that shouldn't be have already mapped out what our responses will be to their actions. And have you wondered ever, with all these shootings in schools or in shopping malls or wherever, whenever these happen, then there's talk of a ban. There's talk of cracking down and increasing laws and regulations, banning certain weapons. And what happens? More and more guns are purchased. More and more ammunition is purchased. Why would they do this, knowing that that's what the populace... I thought they want to disarm the populace. Indirectly, they're arming them, aren't they? Indirectly, they're causing them to increase their stores of ammunition, their capabilities, their weapon stashes. Have you ever thought about it like this? Then there's the story a couple years ago. Homeland Security in the United States bought, I don't know how many million rounds of hollow point bullets. Hollow point bullets are not just rounds for shooting, they're rounds designed to kill. They spread out in flight because aerodynamically there's a little divot in the tip of the bullet. So when it leaves the chamber through the rifle, through the bore, and hits the air, as it goes through the air, it expands, or when it hits the target, rather. It will expand out and increase its diameter and rip a gaping hole. I'm not sure if it starts to spread before or once it hits the target. Probably once it hits the target. Otherwise, the range would be reduced. The air drag, would slow its velocity. So I'm guessing that the divot is designed so it only really creates that spread on impact. Anyway, the point is that I started to feel very anxious in spite of all these daily meditations on trusting the Lord, and He's our protector, and no evil shall befall you. You see how easily we go astray in our minds, even not just we think of like sheep we have all gone astray, like we've wandered after the lusts of our flesh, after the world, into unbelief, into sin. It's more than that. What about fear and anxiousness? Isn't that all a form of unbelief? Fear and anxiousness. And the truth of the matter is, we have a very real, very active and living enemy in this world. And the enemy uses people. You have an enemy of your soul in the spiritual realm, and you also have, if you're like me, you probably have personal enemies. Personal people that you know, that they don't like you, or they seem to undermine you, challenge you, seem to be against you at every turn. They slander you, gossip about you, put you down, make digs. They're really your enemy, aren't they? They're not your friends. They aren't friendly when you get right down to the nitty-gritty. And then you have other enemies. You have the enemy which is in so many places in this world, and lo and behold, right here. The enemy of the state. Now, that expression, enemy of the state, is often used to mean those who oppose the state. But the state is also in opposition to you in many, many ways and many, many turns. And in times like this, especially under the guise of helping, when they're taking away your civil liberties, when they're using a crisis that really is unsubstantiated to the degree that they're going into overreach and unconstitutional measures, they're your enemy. It's an enemy of your civil liberties, an enemy of your God-given rights. So we're going to talk a minute about salvation from our enemies, because we have them. When you're going to be stopped and questioned, even if you're just going to the grocery store, and told you can't go without permission, you can't go there, you have an enemy. They're taking away your right to travel. They're taking your right to do business. They've already done that to a lot of people. And I will say that I don't know. I haven't been following every single story or reading in depth on these things. I do know in some places mayors have made decrees and governors have made decrees. And the sense of whether they've actually taken them away or they implied that you cannot do them, and people have just folded. They've just, somebody sneezed and, okay, sure, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. They bend over. Well, I would posit that I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know if this is a trial balloon. I don't know if this is the real broadside against humanity, to go for the one world government, the digital currency, the chipping everybody, forced vaccinations, a real Orwellian nightmare that's been in process in various stages throughout the world for many, 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 many years, even before I was born, before you were born probably. It's all about destroying the gospel of Christ, Christianity. That's what it really comes down to. And the United States is of particular interest in being destroyed because of our freedom of speech, freedom of religion, our right to assemble, our right to protest, all these kinds of things, and our right to bear arms, to protect those other rights. So, the enemy is very real, and even if these things don't come to pass at the moment, you can see how easily they will. And to finish my thought of what I was saying, I've concluded that I don't know if this is a trial or this is going to be the end run. You have to look at it like the end run. This is going to go on and going to go as far and deep and wide and on as long as we allow it. And we each have to personally make a decision. Are we going to resist with extreme prejudice, or are we going to just capitulate, quote unquote, turn the other cheek? And these are things to study out and also decide for yourself. If a man asks you for his coat, we're to give him, or ask you for his shirt, we're to give him our coat also, right? So if the state asks you for this, do you just give him everything? See, these things need to be kind of ciphered out as to what really the right way to go, what the wisest path is. But the timing, what troubles me about this being the actual end run, that this is not going to let up, that this is the moment that's been decided, we're going for it. We are going to confiscate X, Y, and Z from people. We're going to control their very lives, their movements. They can only, we're going to say jump, and they're going to say how high. Why I believe that is because people my age, let's say 35 years old and above, the men, most of them have a wife and children, or at least half of them. Well, more than half. I mean, I'm not saying they're all married. They have a family, and their main concern is feeding them and keeping them housed and protected, and fed and clothed and fed. And to do that, they have to have a job. There's not time to go protest. There's not time to go do militia training and practice and organize and talk late into the night discussing the wisest course of action against our oppressors. Then you add into the mix all the entertainments that for decades we have been conditioned to be staples of our daily lives, whether it's gaming, sports, alcohol, sports, That's all that stuff that's dumbed us down and robbed us of time and left us unprepared. So you have those folks of that last generation that may have had the critical thinking skills and had some of the values to be real staunch, to hunker down and defend them and not let go of them. They're in a position now of weakness. They can't. Not in numbers, not the numbers that they could have. And then now you've got these millennials, the soy boys, the ones who are confused about their very gender. Put that between, let's say, I don't know what you call this generation, if they're all millennials from 0 to 35, but let's say the ones who are of fighting age, let's say 15 to 35. They've been eating corrupted food. Their hormones have been corrupted. That's one reason that they can get away with this transgenderism, the homosexuality, finding great acceptance, children not knowing whether they're bisexual, homosexual, or heterosexual, what gender they are. Their hormones have been they're confused on many, many levels. Fundamentally, they've been fed food that has messed them up. Not to mention all the food that's gone into their mind of such poor quality. Lacking critical thinking skills, most educated by the state, brainwashed, given values. The values in my generation were being subverted. I see it now. I didn't see it at the time. In fact, I embraced a lot of the rock and roll rebellion. I embraced it. There's a certain degree of that naturally in young people. And just like there's the terrible twos, and I don't know what you call them, I've forgotten, developmentally, that, a baby starts saying no, and then that's their favorite word. And that's healthy because they're creating their boundaries. Well, there's something similar to that in teenagers, young people, and it does help keep moving things forward progressively to a degree. That's not to say every young person totally rejects their parents' values. When something's right and good, and perfect and good, especially, many people recognize that and recognize that there's no better alternative than what's true and right and good, except that their own iniquities would lead them away, their own lusts of the flesh, their own propensity towards wickedness. But there are those who have capitalized that to destroy entire societies, to destroy destroying the family, right? They've used those propensities of our fallen nature to destroy families. And when you destroy families, you can destroy a nation. Has that not happened in this country? Who are these people? Who are these people? Well, at the top, they're Luciferians. A more apt way to describe them would be the synagogue of Satan. Okay? And then you throw the word synagogue in there, and now you're getting into a little closer to home. But let's not generalize. Let's not generalize and throw everybody under the bus, because that's not the reality of the situation. Every man will be accountable for himself. Every woman will be accountable for himself. But there is a people who control Hollywood. And Hollywood isn't just about entertaining and influencing the entire world. Entertaining and influencing United States, right? It has had a major impact on the entire world. There's Disney. There's those who own the banking system. Those who control the Federal Reserve. Those who control governments. Who are those people? Well, again, being of the synagogue of Satan, their God is Satan, and they are inspired, motivated, energized. I would say energized. That's important because when you say there's no rest for the wicked, we can think of them as being tormented. They also don't sleep, just like rust never sleeps. They don't sleep. They lay upon their bed thinking, how can I do mischief? And mischief sounds like a little kiddie word. No, not the kind of mischief we're talking about. All right, I'm speaking in some vague terms here, but the point being is that we have an enemy, and the enemy is making a frontal assault upon our very life. They have stopped churches from gathering. Now I want you to look at the fact of that particular effect as possibly a good thing. Now people will have to meet privately in their homes. Christians are going to want to get together and fellowship. It's commanded and it's in them. It's in their spirit. It's in their nature to fellowship, to break bread together, to sing hymns together, to encourage one another, to help one another, to love one another. They're going to find that expression. And they're going to, of course, want to fellowship around the Word. They aren't going to be sitting in a pew being entertained for 1 hour a week by some gatekeeper, by some pastor who gets up and tells jokes. Because that's what he learned is good homiletics. How you convey a message in modern terms, and you make them laugh, and you pique their interest, and you have these pregnant pauses in your speech, and all this bullshit. All the while drawing on a pretty nice salary living in a parsonage. It's the word I couldn't think of yesterday. Anyway, we have an enemy, and he's troubling our soul even before this happened, but right now we're looking at some very serious times possibly. It already is, right? So I'm gonna do Psalm 27 this morning, a Psalm of David. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Now remember, appropriate this to yourself. I'm just going to read it, but this first person is not, we're not just reading it from David's standpoint. These words are your song, or your prayer, and my prayer. They were given and handed down to us, Spirit inspired. When the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. The war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. Think about that. They'll come upon us to eat up our flesh. What does that mean? It means they'll cause us to starve. They'll tear us up. Cause us to starve. Cause us to wither. Make us sick. Lots of ways to look at this. They stumbled and fell. And the mighty living God will do that for his people today, the same as he did then and has throughout centuries. Though a host should encamp against us, our hearts shall not fear. Though the National Guard, your city police, your sheriffs, though they encamp against you, though they try to enforce you, the military, be confident. In this be confident. One thing I have desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. For in the time of trouble he shall hide me in his pavilion. In the secret of his tabernacle shall he hide me. He shall set me upon a rock. And now shall my head be lifted up above my enemies round about me. Therefore will I offer in his tabernacle sacrifices of joy. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises unto the Lord. You know, even right now, while you have food in your pantry, in your refrigerator, and on your shelves in your basement, wherever, you have food enough to eat for today. Give thanks for it. Give thanksgiving. Because I think you can see now. And I would say this, probably even more importantly, when you're using the bathroom and you use that toilet paper, thank God for that. Thank God you have that right now. When you have gasoline in your car, when you go to the pump, do you thank God the same as you do when you sit down to a meal? I mean, many believers, they'll faithfully take a moment to bow their heads and give thanks for their meal. But do you ever give thanks when you're pumping gas at the car? That's dwelling in the secret place of the Most High. No one sees you do that. Now, you don't get down and make a show of it and raise your hands and bow your head and get on your knees at the pump and you're thanking God you have the money to get gas and a vehicle of your own to get around in. No, you can be thankful in your heart as you're pumping gas, and that is dwelling in the secret place of the Most High. That is going to your Father in secret, because in your heart, in your mind, you're communicating to Him your gratitude for providing everything you need in this day. He'll never leave us or forsake us, He promised, right? Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy also upon me and answer me. When you said, seek my face, my heart said unto you, thy face, O Lord, will I seek. Hide not your face far from me, and put not your servant away in anger. You have been my help, leave me not, neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. You know, the Lord, when we cry to Him with our voice, and I encourage you, and I'm encouraging myself to do that as well. Don't just think your thoughts of prayer. Think your thoughts. Oh, the Lord knows my thoughts. And that's true, and that's very good. But open your mouth and speak as if there's faith in that. Find a room. No one can hear you. Your quote-unquote prayer closet, if you will. Your bedroom, the bathroom. When you're in the shower. Use your voice. Have mercy upon me and answer me. You know, it is a merciful thing for God to listen to us and answer us. We are not worthy of this privilege, but we have it, and may Christ be glorified because we have the privilege through Him to have this steady, faithful relationship with the holy, righteous, living God of all creation, no matter how wicked we've known or felt ourselves to be. Hide not your face far from me, put not your servant away in anger. You know, it says that the Lord is angry with the wicked every day. How patient He must be, because we know there's a lot of wicked people in the world who act wickedly and have positions of power and use that power to act wickedly. And the wrath against them is coming. But He is slow to anger, and He also is patient and merciful, even to the unjust. But let's not forget our own sinfulness. And if we have such a precious gift and treasure and privilege to draw near to the Lord, to seek His face, it's the right thing to be mindful that it's in mercy that He listens to us. It's in mercy, and it's a gracious thing that he is not avoiding us in his disgust and anger with our calloused hearts, our darkened minds, our wanderings, our willfulness, our disobedience, Do you feel yourself to be this kind of a person? I do. I was just called holier than thou by somebody. Well, okay. That's too bad. Thou hast been my help. Leave me not, neither forsake me, O God of my salvation. When my father and my mother forsake me, then the Lord will take me up. Teach me thy way, O Lord, and lead me in a plain path because of my enemies. Deliver me not over unto the will of my enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and as such breathe out cruelty. I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord and the land of the living. Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. We need to be taught the way this hour, what to do, how to spend our money, what we need to do to prepare, to batten down the hatches, to sustain ourselves. But we also need to remember, we don't need to gather manna for next August. We don't need to go crazy. The Lord can feed us and provide for us in spite of our enemies, what they want us to cut us off, what they want to cut us off from, right? Lead me in a plain path. Plain as in clear, plain as in simple. I encourage you to use the time to simplify your life, to reprioritize. And something else that occurred to me as I just read this a moment ago: do not deliver me not over unto the will of my enemies, for false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. Do you recognize that these quote-unquote leaders, first of all, they're not leaders, and shame on them who regard themselves as your leaders, and that shame on the people who call them leaders. They're public servants. They've been allegedly elected. They're elected servants. They're elected representatives. They are not leaders. Not in the way we understand leaders today. Leaders today are your rulers. Right? Okay? False witnesses are risen up against you. Well, these are people who have risen up the ranks in society, and they are lying against you. They are saying you can't think for yourself. You don't know what's good for you. You don't know how to take care of your own health. You don't know how to manage this situation. We will manage it for you. Stay in your homes. It's a false witness. Maybe we don't think of that as a false witness right away, but think about it. We think of false witness as somebody who's gossiping or telling lies about you. Well, aren't they telling lies about you and me? We know what's best for you. We are the nanny state. We are your keeper. We are your overlords. Well, I didn't grow up. My ancestors didn't die to have overlords. Did yours? Maybe yours didn't die. Maybe yours didn't have to die for that. Are you willing to die now? I think you should be. I think that the righteous are bold as a lion, and we need to have our arms ready. Now, I'd rather get through this life and never have to kill or harm a soul. And I have to think carefully, what hill do I want to die on? Because I can tell you, without unless the Lord wanted to anoint you like some kind of Rambo, you're not going to make it out of there, because they've got the numbers, unless we were all organized. But you won't find your local pastor organizing a little militia in the body, or making sure that all the men in his congregation have guns and that they know that the enemy has been working through the state for centuries to destroy the very right to be a believer and worship and fellowship and protect the word. You don't think that's true? Just look at China. Christians have a pretty hard time over there. And that's what they want the world to look like. China is your pretty much your example of what the powers that shouldn't be want the entire world to be like. All right, so let me tell you about a man who could read this word and had incredible insights into it and wrote it down. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Here is personal interest. My light, my salvation. Now this is for you, my brother, my sister, and all my friends. The soul is assured of it, and therefore declaring it boldly. My light, into the soul at the new birth, divine light is poured as a precursor of salvation. Where there is not enough light to see our own darkness and too long for the Lord Jesus, there is no evidence of salvation. We were just talking about that, seeing our own darkness and saying, have mercy upon me, Lord, and don't put me away because you're anchored. Do you have enough light to see your own darkness? Do you have enough light to long for the Lord? If you don't, is there any evidence of your salvation? Salvation finds us in the dark, but it does not leave us there. It gives light to those who sit in the valley of the shadow of death. After conversion, our God is our joy, comfort, guide, and teacher. And in every sense, our light. He is light within, light around, light reflected from us, and light to be revealed to us. Note, it is not said merely that the Lord gives light, but that he is light. Nor that he gives salvation, but that he is salvation. He then, who by faith has laid hold upon God, has all covenant blessings in his possession. Every light is not the sun, but the Son is the Father of all lights. This being made sure as a fact, the argument drawn from it is put in the form of a question. Quote, whom shall I fear? Unquote. A question which is its own answer. The powers of darkness are not to be feared, for the Lord our light destroys them. And the damnation of hell is not to be dreaded by us, for the Lord is our salvation. This is a very different challenge from that of boastful Goliath, for it is based upon a very different foundation. It rests not upon the conceited rigor of an arm of flesh, but upon the real power of the omnipotent I am. Quote, the Lord is the strength of my life, unquote. Here is a third glowing epithet to show that the writer's hope was fastened with a threefold cord which could not be broken. We may well accumulate terms of praise where the Lord lavishes deeds of grace. Our life derives all its strength from him who is the author of it. If he designs to make us strong, we cannot be weakened by all the machinations of the adversary. Quote, of whom shall I be afraid? Unquote. The bold question looks into the future as well as the present. If God be for us, who can be against us, now or in time to come? We're in the time to come, from this man's time. And let me say that the Lord our light destroys them. When it said a little bit ago, the powers of darkness are not to be feared, the Lord our light destroys them. This is where we need to be versed. We need to be meditating. When I say meditating, I mean reading, considering, that kind of thing. Edifying our own selves with verses in times of fear. And well, in these times, let me put it that way. In these times, we need to be finding the Word, our place of our rod and our staff, really, to keep us from falling. And that light, knowing that Word, we're going to need to speak it and say it to these powers of darkness. All right, verse 2. This verse records a past deliverance and is an instance of the way in which experience should be employed to reassure our faith in times of trial. Each word is instructive. When the wicked, because I'll read the verse again. When the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. When the wicked. It is a hopeful sign for us when the wicked hate us. If our foes were godly men, it would be a sore sorrow. But as for the wicked, their hatred is better than their love. Quote, even mine enemies and my foes, unquote. There were many of them. They were of different sorts, but they were unanimous in mischief and hearty in hatred. Quote, came upon me, unquote. Advanced to the attack, leaping upon the victim like a lion upon its prey. Quote, to eat up my flesh, unquote. Like cannibals, they would make a full end of the man, tear him limb from limb, and make a feast for their malice. The enemies of our souls are not deficient in ferocity. They yield no quarter and ought to have none in return. See in what danger David was, in the grip and grasp of numerous, powerful, and cruel enemies, and yet observe his perfect safety and their utter discomfiture. Quote, they stumbled and fell, unquote. God's breath blew them off their legs. There were stones in the way which they never reckoned upon, and over these they made ignominious tumble. This was literally true in the case of our Lord in Gethsemane, when those who came to take him went backward and fell to the ground. And herein he was a prophetic representative of all wrestling believers who, rising from their knees, shall by the power of faith throw their foes upon their faces. Now, we can take comfort knowing that the enemy may lay his plans, and I mean even our archenemy, Satan himself, may lay his plans, but he's not omnipotent and he's not omniscient, and he certainly cannot outsmart, outwit, outmaneuver the Lord your God, your Father. And there are places he will stumble that he never accounted for. Their plans will fail. For example, they may have had a bunch of test runs on this virus. They may have had success in certain areas, but they may find that it just isn't igniting the way they thought it would. I've been a little surprised at the discrepancy between this virus, as they claim it is, this virus and its rate of spreading and its mortality and its morbidity from the way they're playing it. And it makes me think how amazing that they realize how stupid people are and they're going for it anyway. But I'm also wondering as if they realize they don't really have the gas, that this is not as deadly and as pervasive as maybe at first it appeared to be. Maybe they rolled it out in haste. I don't know. I really don't know. But I am suggesting to you that these kinds of things are possible with the Lord, because the enemy, the Lord sits and has them in the heavens and he laughs. He has them in derision. He has them in derision. They lay their plans, but they don't come. They fall apart. So we can rejoice in that, Be confident that the enemy's plans will fall apart, that they will not be as effective. Verse 3, though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. You know, I see a lot of pictures of people posting, whether they're recycled pictures or whether they are just movements of machinery on trains, just normal, because you see that normally. Moving around these Humvees, Jeeps, Jeeps and military vehicles, transport vehicles, and they always are alarmed and saying it's happening, and, well, I don't know. But let's not let our hearts fear. Before the actual conflict, while as yet the battle is untried, the warrior's heart, being held in suspense, is very liable to become fluttered. The encamping host often inspires greater dread than the same host in actual affray, meaning the bark is worse than the bite. Young tells us of some, quote, who feel 1,000 deaths and fearing one, unquote. I don't know who Young is, but I've heard something like that. A coward dies 1,000 times, a brave man only once, or something to that effect. It's the same kind of thing. Doubtless the shadow of anticipated trouble is to timorous minds. Timorous came up yesterday in Matthew Henry. Timorous being fearful, right? Doubtless the shadow of anticipated trouble is to timorous minds a more prolific source of sorrow than the trouble itself. I can say amen. Yep. World, it's true. I've experienced this. And one thing I tell myself many times is that almost everything you worry about doesn't come to pass. But faith puts a strengthening plaster to the back of courage and throws out of the window the dregs of the cup of trembling. Quote, though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident, unquote. When it actually comes to push of pike, I think basically that means when push comes to shove, faith's shield will ward off the blow. And if the first brush should be but the beginning of a war, yet faith's banners will wave in spite of the foe. I think I need a do-over on that. The war should rise against me, and this I will be confident. When it actually comes push of pike, a pike is like a spear, right? When it actually comes to push of pike, faith's shield will ward off the blow. And if the first brush should be but the beginning of a war, yet faith's banners will wave in spite of the foe. Though battle should succeed battle, and one campaign should be followed by another, the believer will not be dismayed at the length of the conflict. That's a good word. If it's not one thing, it's the other, right? We've been assailed and assaulted time after time on front after front. Even in your lifetime, especially in recent years with the advent of the internet, the news 24/7 news cycle, there's just so many things going on, you can't even shake a stick at them. You can't keep up. Though battle should succeed battle, and one campaign should be followed by another. And I'll add, death by 1,000 cuts. That's what's been going on, right? The believer will not be dismayed at the length of the conflict. I'm here to tell you this conflict's going to be, unfortunately, unlikely for most of us, all the days of our life. Now, he will lead us beside the still waters. Thank the Lord. He will lead us beside the still waters. Give us rest. But this conflict is going to go on till the end of the age. Reader, this third verse is the comfortable and logical inference from the second. Confidence is the child of experience. Have you been delivered out of great perils? Then set up your ensign. Wait at your watchfire and let the enemy do his worst. Okay, so let's set up our ensign, Don't be afraid to say in whom you believe, because you know in whom you believe through experience. Wait at your watchfire. What's your watchfire? It's in prayer. It's in filling yourself with the word of truth, the sword of truth, right? All right. Well, I hope that's encouragement for you today, and that's about all the time we have this morning. And I hope to do Psalm 91 using Matthew Henry later today. And I hope you make a great day. And we'll go out on some of the beautiful sounds of the rain, so you maybe digest this and just kind of relax. Have a really good day. Be kind. And be safe.